Welcome to E2 Church. My name is Nate Perez. I'm the youth pastor here at E2 Church. And I'm a newly ordained pastor. And so I'm walking in a new anointing today because this is my first message that I get to preach to you as a pastor. And so I'm ready to preach the word of God, but first I want to honor our lead pastor because that is not me. I know we're wearing the same thing today, but we didn't plan this, I promise. But Pastor Jared and Trin are the lead pastors of this church, and what they do is just so amazing. One of my biggest pleasures is that I get to be a part of your guys' legacy. And so I want to thank you for pioneering what we are seeing in Elk Grove. But most of you probably came for the sex talk. You came to hear Pastor Jared preach on sex. Sex week is next week. I get to preach on legacy because we had some kids in the room earlier. And parents aren't ready for that conversation yet. And so I get to preach on legacy. And I believe I have a word for you. And you're probably asking yourself, man, what does this 24-year-old kid have to teach me on legacy? Now, let me remind you what it says in the Bible about looking down on youth. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. But I truly believe that no matter what stage of life that you are in, whether young or old, single, married, dating, that I have a word on legacy for you today. And so we're going to be in Philippians chapter 4, verse 9. And it says, keep putting into practice, say practice, all you learned and received from me and everything you heard from me and saw me doing. Then the God of peace will be with you. The title of my message comes from a great prophet. His name is Chris Brown. And it says, look at me now. Turn over as you take your seats, say, look at me now. Look at me now. So I've had the opportunity to travel the world really only because of one person, that's Pastor Jared, because whenever he travels, I get to travel with him. And so that's when Trin declines the offer and I'm next up in line, right? And so I get to travel with Pastor Jared sometimes. You know, I've traveled with him enough to know now that whenever I travel with Pastor Jared, we are finding a CrossFit gym and we are working out. Like there is no exception. And so I've had my time where the first time I traveled with him, I didn't bring any workout clothes and he was like, you're going in that. And I convinced him that I couldn't go because I needed to look good for the conference that we're going to be at later. But wherever we go, we are working out. And I consider myself an athlete. Like I ran cross country and track in college. So I consider myself an athlete. But Pastor Jared is just a different animal. I mean, just go on his Instagram and look at his Instagram post that he posts about CrossFit. He's a different type of athlete. And I remember specifically last year, Pastor Jared got invited to go preach in Canada. And so Trin declined the offer. I was next in line. And so I got to go to Toronto, Canada for the very first time ever in my life. Canada. They really do talk like that. I promise you. Like everything you've heard, they really do sound like that. But as we go into Canada and we're going to land, we are looking out the window of the plane and we see one of the biggest snowstorms that we have ever seen in our life. And I'm a Cali kid through and through. The only snow I've seen is Tahoe. And it doesn't even snow. I think it's fake, right? And so I've never really even seen snow at this point because I'm a Cali kid. And I'm just thinking, you know, maybe we won't work out. You know, it's snowing. We get to the hotel. And, maybe Pastor Jared's going to say, Nate, like, it's too cold to work out. Let's just make a nice cup of coffee. Like, just warm ourselves a little. And you got to preach tomorrow. Let's relax a little bit, Pastor. And he tells me as soon as we get into the room, the Uber's going to be here in 5 minutes. I need you to get dressed because we're going to the CrossFit gym. And I'm like, oh, man, all right. And so we get in the car with our Uber. And our Uber driver starts to tell us that this is the first time he's ever driven in snow. And so maybe I'm thinking, I was like, okay, maybe we'll just go back and he just doesn't trust our driver. No, we go. And so we get to this parking lot. And in this parking lot, it does not look like there's a CrossFit gym anywhere. All we see is this building that is so small. It's around 10 feet by 10 feet. And I'm like, oh, he got the wrong address. Let's go. And I was like, we're gonna go back. We're gonna enjoy our night. And so he's like, no. Like, we'll get out the car. Let's just go look. And so we go in this small building, come to find out that the CrossFit gym is underneath the building, that there are stairs as soon as you enter, and you gotta go under. And so we start our workout. And I'm new to CrossFit, so I was trying to learn the movements, and I just couldn't get it down. And I was getting frustrated because I'm an athlete. I should do this. And I started to get frustrated, and the workout ends, and I have a feeling of relief that, the workout is over, that I'm done. But no, Pastor Jared, he looks at me, he says, hey, I got to do some extra work real quick. And so why don't you grab that barbell over there, put some weights on it, and keep practicing the movement that you couldn't get down, because you got to get this down. And so I continue to practice the movement. And what I started to realize, the more I've been around Pastor Jared, is in that moment, I got to see the discipline of his fitness in his life at that moment. That there was nothing that was going to get in the way that was going to stop him from working out. That there was going to be nothing that was going to reject him to a workout, that he was going to do anything it took. And I got to see that discipline firsthand. And I started to think about all the other things that I've gotten to see in him and how much it's affected my life now as well. That although we dress similar today, that if you would ask my team, we kind of operate similarly as well. And that's because a lot of the things that he does, I get to see. And so I started to do a little bit of research into this, and there are articles that talk about how strong of an influence that the things you see and the people around you have in your life. That in the business world, it's called your network is your net worth. That in culture, in church, we call it can't be taught, it has to be caught. That you just have to get around the people and see it. And so the articles say that if you are around successful people, you are more likely to be successful yourself just because you have now seen it done. And I started to think about, when it comes to legacy, we often just think about it as just our children. That it's just an inheritance that I leave. That it's just something that I gotta build, something that I gotta make for my kids, something that I gotta create. And although it is actually that, because the Oxford Dictionary defines legacy as an amount of money or property left to someone in a will, I wanna talk about legacy on how I believe God gave it to me. And so I'm gonna take you to Nate's University for a little minute, where I've even changed the word, but the definition that I believe God gave me is legacy is what you leave with people from what they see of you. See, the reality is you don't need money to leave a legacy. You don't need children to leave a legacy. You don't need to build something, accomplish something, do something to have a legacy. But you can have a legacy right now at a young age. You can have a legacy right now at an older age. That your legacy isn't over for you who are older. That your legacy is still continuing, because it happens with everyone you are in relationship with who you come into contact with, because they see from you the things, whether good or bad, it leaves an impact in their life. And people are seeing your life. And the legacy you leave is the life that you live. And no matter who you are called to live a life that matters. Say, look at me now. Matthew chapter 5, verse 13 says, you are the salt of the earth. What good is it if salt has lost its flavor? Can you make it salty again? It will be thrown out and trampled underfoot as worthless. Now, let me give some context to the salt, because Jesus isn't just saying that you need to flavor your food a little, because some of you do. What he's actually saying and trying to describe is, in this culture, salt is a hot commodity. That it has so much influence in this culture at the time that they were believed to trade with it, that they would pay wages with it, that it was known as white gold. And the reason why it was known as a hot commodity is because they didn't have fridges back then. What they had was salt. And so they would preserve their food by engulfing the food in salt. And that was how they would preserve things. And so it was needed back then. And what Jesus was trying to get his disciples and the believers to understand is they had influence. you have influence, that your voice matters, parents. Your voice matters, that your lives matter, that if there is anyone to influence the world, anyone to tell the culture what it should be the people of his church. And then the next part is a little weird. It says, but what good is salt if it has lost its flavor? Can you make it salty again? It will be thrown out and trampled underfoot. See, it's not talking that you can take flavor out of a food, but what he's saying is if you are not the influencer, you become the influenced. Wow. That you have to stand firm in something that you believe so that you could begin to influence the environment around you, because if you don't, you will get influenced yourself. That you have to become the influencer. Now, I'm not talking followers. I'm talking faith. That you have to influence people. And in this next part, it says the light. You are the light of the world, like a city on a hilltop that cannot be hidden. No one lights a lamp and then puts it under a basket. Instead, a lamp is placed on a stand where it gives light to everyone in the house. And so this light, Jesus calls himself the light all throughout the Gospels. That he is calling himself the light, and him giving us the title of the light in this passage right now is him giving us the responsibility that it's not just about us anymore. It's not just about you. That we not only have been given the light, we have not only received the light when we step into relationship, but now we have a responsibility to give light to others. And what light does is it illuminates. It gives the ability for people to see what they could not see in the dark. And because we are in a dark world, there are people living in a dark place, and the church needs a group of believers that will expose the things that the world is calling his people, that the world is naming his body. But you gotta be a light. And so you gotta show your light. And then here's the last part, verse 16. In the same way, let your good deeds shine out for all to see, so that everyone will praise your heavenly Father. See, people need to see your influence. They need to see your light, but they need to see God in you. That we've created a culture that whenever we do something, we want to exalt ourselves. But what God is saying is, through your good deeds, let your Father be exalted. That let Jesus be exalted. That it isn't about you. It's not just about others, but it's about God. Because if we base our lives just on us, our lives will not point to Jesus. And where I think we've gotten it wrong is we've built a culture where people are only impacted by what I build and not how I live. And so we don't necessarily attribute legacy with our interactions every day, with what our kids see every day, with what our coworkers see from us every day. That's why we have such a grind mentality too. That ain't no one gonna do the work that I gotta do. That no one's gonna build it for me. That no one's gonna achieve it for me. That it's something that I gotta do. So I'm gonna put my head down. I'm gonna get to work. That it's work and my goals and aspirations and dreams before people. And what we need to see is that you might feel that you need to build your legacy and not live your legacy. But can I tell you that if you live your legacy becomes the life that you live, and that when people will see your life, they will just get encouraged and say, there is something different about them, that there is something on their life that I just need to get around them, that I just need to be with them, that I just need to get around you. And because of this, your relationships will thrive. That your relationships will get better with everyone around you. Relationships with your parents, with your children, with your coworkers, with your jobs, with your boss, that your relationships will start to thrive. But can I get real with the parents real quick? I'm the youth pastor, I got to. Can I get real with the parents? So I have a lot of parents who will come up to me and ask me, I just want my kids to have a real relationship with God. I just want them to be able to experience it for themselves. That I want them to read the Bible. I want them to pray. I want them to worship. And the first thing I will tell the parents, like, man, that's great. I'm fully believing that with you. But my question to you is, do they see you do it? Do they see you read the Bible? Do they see you praying? Do they see you worshiping? Or is it something that you say, do as I say, not do as I do? Because I will tell you that your kids will do as you do and also do as you say. But there is more power when you model something. And so you got to be able to model it. They got to see it from you first, because your kids have access to see anything that they want right now. Anything in the world, and if you don't give them something to see and model, they will find it elsewhere. That they will find it somewhere else. And let me just clarify, because I think now that as I'm talking, I'm built this pressure that you got to live a perfect life, right? That you feel like you got to do everything correctly, that you feel like you always got to pray now for your kids to pray. You always got to read your Bible now for your kids to read the Bible. But that's not the case, because we are human. And so the reality is that you will never be perfect. You will never live a perfect life, but you are called to live a progressing life. And so you have to challenge yourself to progress in your life, but you can't be perfect, because there was one human on this earth that was perfect, and his name was Jesus. And all our lives is to do is point people to Jesus. And so what kind of legacy do you leave with people when they see your life? Can I tell you that if you want to build a legacy by the life you live, there's 3 things that matter. First one is you matter. To your neighbor, say you matter. To your neighbor, say, 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 9 says, but you are not like that, for you are a chosen people, a royal priest, a holy nation, God's very own possession. And as a result, you can show others the goodness of God, for he called you out of the darkness and to his wonderful light. My wife and I, we hit our 2-year mark this past Monday. 2 years. Feels like a lifetime, man. We hit our 2 years mark, and what I learned in marriage is that there is one who cooks and one who doesn't. And by default, because I am Mexican, I am the one who cooks. And so whenever people come over, I'm cooking. I'm cooking for Lindsay. I'm cooking when she gets off of work. I got some house husband duties that I got to do sometimes, you know. And so, hey, happy wife, happy life. And so I remember when we moved into our home, we had said that we wanted to throw a home welcoming party for our friends, where we would invite our friends over and we would cook for them. And so when in doubt, as a Mexican, you just go to tacos. And so I was like, I'll just make some tacos. Like, I can make some street tacos. It's easy enough. So I made tacos. I bought the beans, and then I made Spanish rice from my mom's recipe. And you know, the biggest compliment that you get from when you cook is people's faces. And so I remember as our friends came over, I was looking for their faces and looking for their expressions. You know, tacos, great. Beans, great. But the rice, the rice was rough. And I started to ask them, you know, like, what did you guys like? Like, give me some tips, give me some feedback. I just wanted to praise, you know, like, oh, it was great. And they're like, oh man, the tacos were great. The beans were amazing. Well, I was like, I bought the beans. What about the rice? The rice was rough. Like, the rice was nasty. And Lindsay even tells me after, she's like, yeah, that was not it. And so we have people over last week, and you know, I decided I'm gonna make the rice again. And Lindsay looks at me, she's like, are you sure that you wanna make the rice? And what I realized in making the rice this time is I forgot a key ingredient last time. That is the thing that actually gives Spanish rice its flavor. It's called chicken bouillon. Yeah, y'all know, y'all judging me right now, all right? I added it the second time. But what I didn't realize is that something so small could give something so much flavor. That it was such a detail in cooking the Spanish rice, and you might feel that you are such a small piece to the puzzle of the overall Christianity of body, that you don't think your life matters, that you don't think that you matter. But can I tell you, you are a royal nation, a royal priesthood, that you do matter to God, that He has called you, that you matter to God. And I think a lot of us, you've placed your value in your ability to do stuff. You've placed your value in you achieving and accomplishing things that in your position or in your season of life that you used to matter. But now because you're not in that season anymore, that you don't necessarily anymore. Wow. Can I remind you that you matter simply because God says you matter? because you are God's child. And once you sit in that understanding that legacy isn't regulated to having kids, it's not regulated to building something, you can step into legacy right now because now you won't take a day for granted. That you don't have to wait till you hit a certain age, that you can have a legacy at 13 years old, that you can have a legacy at 30 years old, at 80 years old. You see, legacy isn't by chance, it's by choice. That you have to choose to step into it right now. That you have to choose that, I'm gonna step out of the sin that I'm living in. I'm gonna step out of the addiction that I'm living in. And I'm gonna choose to create a different legacy for myself, because here's the reality is your past is your past. You can't change your history, but you can change your legacy. See, I heard a pastor say it like this, that what has been doesn't have to be what always is. That for a lot of us, that we've encountered something and experienced something in our life, and now that just has become our identity. That everywhere we go, that is who we are, something that we experience. And can I tell you right now, what has been doesn't always have to be what will be. That you can make a decision today to change your legacy. That as you step into relationship with God, He has given you a new name. That He has given you a calling. That He has given you a purpose. But here's the tricky thing. We can look at these things and say, oh my God, I matter. I need self-care. I just need to love myself. I just need to think about me, myself, and I, because I matter. But the tricky thing is we're naturally selfish as human. And what we have to learn in building a life that matters is our legacy is about us, but it's not for us. Because the lives around you are watching, and those lives matter. Second point is they matter. Turn your neighbor, say they matter. We're going to be out of Matthew chapter 22 for this. It says, Jesus replied, you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and this is the first and greatest commandment. A second is equally as important. Love your neighbor as yourself, and the entire law and all the demands of the prophets are based on these two commandments. See, I grew up in a small town called Tracy, California, about an hour south of here. And we grew up in a fairly small church. It wasn't big, but it wasn't small. It was about medium size. And I just remember growing up, my parents were always involved. They were helping lead worship. They were leading other couples. My dad was on the board of elders. And so we were very involved as a family. And I just remember that the lead pastor comes up to me one day in middle school and asked me to take me out to lunch after school one day. And I thought that was the weirdest thing. But, my mom being in church, she's like, no, you're going. I didn't have a choice. And so all throughout middle school and all throughout high school, every month, our lead pastor would take me out to lunch. That he would take me out to lunch. He would ask, what's God doing in your life, Nate? I was like, I don't know, I'm 14. Like, what if... He would tell me what God's doing in his life. He would tell me the things that he's thinking through with the church, that he would ask my thoughts with the church. And I'll be honest, I was a little rough sometimes. My mom was the worship leader, and I said, look, you got to get a new person in worship. If you want to grow this church, I'm just kidding, Mom. I love you. I love you. But what I really did kind of enjoy was that, he was meeting with me. That the lead pastor was meeting with me, and I thought I was the only one he was doing this with. But he needed to come over to our house for something one day, and as he walks through the door, in walks another kid from the youth group. I'm like, this guy. And so I'm sizing this kid up, and I'm like, who are you? I'm like, what'd you guys do today? Huh? What'd you talk about? And so I'm sizing him up, and I started to think about that this past week, because I never realized it before, but me and that kid are in full-time ministry to this day. That my pastor at that time understood that our lives mattered so much that he was gonna take us out, that now we are a part of the legacy that he is building, simply because one Monday a month that he would take me out to lunch. And I think a lot of us don't think that the people and the influence that you have in other people's lives matter like that. I want to ask you, do the people around you matter to you like they matter to God? Because I think what we've done great at is playing the role and saying they do, but not showing that they do. Oh my God, I love church. I love the body. But you're not in an e-group. You're not meeting with anyone. You're not having coffee with anyone. And I think this has even stepped into our faith. That's just me and Jesus, right? It's just me and my spirituality. It's just me and God. And I think that's great, but you just won't build a life of legacy like that, because the more you love Jesus, the more you love his people, and the closer you get to Jesus, the closer you get to his people, because Jesus is a part of the body, and you have to love the body. And so relationship can stay personal, it just can't stay private. See, that's why I love new believers. They share everything, and they look like they love everyone right now. That you ask a new believer like what they're experiencing, oh my God, how much time do you have? And they seem like they got it down. Like the 2 commandments that Jesus asked you to do, love God, love people. But the reality is that people are hard to love. And I know you have that one person that just pushes your buttons. The coworker that just drives you crazy, and the kid that just will not listen. But the people are hard to love, and because also we've been hurt sometimes. And so now we've set limits to how far we let people into our lives, to what we want them to see. That you're only gonna see what I want you to see, that you have to prove yourself worthy enough to get close to me. Then I'll show the real me. But legacy is simply inviting people into your life because they matter. And if it has limits, your legacy impact will be limited. So you gotta be able to allow yourself to be surrounded by people, not because it's biblical that you're in community, but because it's biblical that you're a light. And so you have to allow yourself to invite people into your home. And for some of you, it might be a little scary that you might not be living a life that is worth looking at, that is worth following. That you don't want to seem hypocritical, because that's what the world has labeled the church already. It's just a bunch of hypocrites in one room telling other people how to live, but they're living the other way. And you don't want to seem that way too. Or for maybe some of you, is you're doing all the right things already, but it's all unseen because you haven't invited people into your life. Maybe you've started your legacy that people are with you and you're doing great right now. You know who you are. But now it's gotten to a point where they see you rather than they see God through you. My last point is God matters. To your neighbor, say, God matters. 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 12 says, some of you are saying, I'm a follower of Paul. Others are saying, I follow Apollos, or I follow Peter, or I only follow Christ. And has Christ been divided into factions? Was I, Paul, crucified for you? Were any of you baptized in the name of Paul? Of course not. And I thank God that I did not baptize any of you except Cephas and Gaius, for now no one can say that they were baptized in my name. For Christ did not send me to baptize, but to preach the good news, and not with clever speech, for fear that the cross of Christ would lose its power. See, the best message that I can give someone else isn't from this pulpit. It isn't from a stage. It isn't from a sermon. The best message that I could give someone else is my life. That I would now model my life of what it looks like to walk with Jesus so that others would do the same thing. But the reality is we've gotten so attached to now the influencer fame that it's about what I do. That it's about what I build. And now we're in a culture where we're just saying, all right, you can look at me now. Like they built their business, I'm building mine. You can look at me like they got their kids, but I just had a baby. I just dedicated them. Look at me, right? They were beautiful. You guys were beautiful. But I think we've built a culture now where we're so infatuated with people's praise that there's a person that they're supposed to see through you. That you've become attached to the attention. And so you're starting to exalt your name. And I just want to take you back to Matthew 5, verse 16, where it says, in the same way, let your good deeds shine out for all to see, so that everyone will praise your heavenly Father. See, the life you live isn't just for you to have a great life. It isn't just for you to build something that is worth something. It isn't for you to matter to the people around you, but it's for people to see God through you. And I remember when Lindsay and I first got married, that, she asked me, what do you want me to do? Like, I'll do anything now. Like, we're married, we're a couple, we do this together, we are one, and I'll help out with the youth ministry. And I told her, that's great. Like, I love it all. But I just want us to be around people. That I just want people to see the way we live because, although we don't live perfect lives, that I like to believe that we do live honorable lives. That when people to see the way that we live, that they would get encouraged, that they would feel purpose when they get around us, that they would feel convicted that they should live lives that are worthy and pleasing to God as well. Because I understand that the best message that I can give someone isn't on this stage, but it's my life. And I think Paul is experiencing the same thing because he has influencers at this time. Apollos, Peter, him, that these are all influencers in the making, that these are people who are starting to make a name for themselves in the kingdom. And what he's trying to get the church to understand is, hey, you don't follow one person in the church. You follow God. That you follow them, but you should be looking to God as the example. And so we have to understand that we should live like that. And the band can come up. And it seems like we are just constantly saying, look at me, look at what I've built, look at what I'm doing. But if you truly want to live a life that matters, I believe that God is saying it's time to look at me now. Because I think as we've built our lives, we've looked at everything. We've looked at the podcast. We've looked at what the world tells us to do. We've looked at what social media tells us how to live. But God is saying that it's time to look at me now. That you're not, whatever you're trying to find, you're not going to find it anywhere else. That you're not going to find it in a strategy. That you're not going to find it in school. You're not going to find it in everything. While everything and all of that is good, that there is only one person that could give you everything that you need. You see, when it comes to the salt, that's where you matter. That you are the salt of the earth. That your influence matters. That your voice matters with the people around you. And what I've seen so much is I have seen so many Christians hush their voice because they don't think it matters in the world. Wow. That they've gone silent. That they don't want to get canceled for the things that they might say now, but when it's in fact biblical. And so you have to realize that you matter through your voice, that you matter through your influence. And when Jesus describes the light in saying that they matter, that the people around you matter, first you have to realize that who are the people around you. And I think Jesus says this because he knew that it was going to get tempting for the Christians to take a step back in their faith. For the church and the body to run away when things got hard. But he said, no, it's a responsibility that you have. That if you have received me, that if you have received Christ, because I am the light, you now carry the light. And so it's your job to bring people to church. It's your job to share your faith. Pastor Jared can't do it for you. The last part is we have to live lives that would do the talking for us, that would live the message that we're trying to preach, that would live the thing that we're trying to do. And this is where legacy starts. That it's not something that you just build and you leave for your children, but legacy is the life that you live. That it's something that you would leave your kids and they would say, man, I am this way because I saw my dad, because I saw my mom. That I'm a better worker because I saw my boss have a level head when things got hard. And the reality is that we're only able to leave a legacy because God has left a legacy for us as well. That Jesus would come down to earth and die on the cross for us. That we would be a part of God's legacy. His legacy for us to then be able to build our own legacy. That it wouldn't be our own name exalted as we build stuff and do stuff, but that it's God's name.